Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Alex Salmond Show. I'm looking forward to you joining me every week as we meet a whole host of politicians, stars of stage and screen, business personalities, influence leaders, and of course those who want to be any of the above. As Robert Burns said, "Our some poor the gift to gie us to see ourselves as others see us." This programme will give people with something to say a platform to say it, and we intend to find out about the personalities behind the public figures. Now, I'm not interested in catching people out in statistics or laying them low with previous quotations. I want to hear from people with ideas and answers and with something positive to contribute. And if they've changed their mind about something, then so much the better. Each week I'll be reading out your tweets and your emails, so please get in touch. I'll also be joined by Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh, who'll be out and about in villages, towns and cities across these islands, speaking to you about the important issues of the day. On this very first show, we have something very special for you. This week I've been to Brussels, where I conducted an in-depth and highly personal interview with the President of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont. 2 months ago, he was virtually unknown. Now he is one of the most famous politicians in all of Europe, because Puigdemont is a president in exile. He has fled to escape criminal charges. Believe me, it's powerful stuff. And with Parliament still engulfed in the sexism scandal, I'll be talking to Baroness Helena Kennedy, who has wide-ranging proposals for sweeping reform in Westminster. And Tasmina will be featuring Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's historic apology on past laws criminalising gay sex. She'll be speaking with senior Conservative MP Crispin Blunt about protecting LGBT rights both domestically and internationally. But first, to a really important part of the show, where I get to hear from you. Over the past week, and even before the show has started, we've received an avalanche of tweets and emails. Can I just say to the media, thanks, folks, for all the publicity. Let's just look at a few of them. Well, first up, a tweet from Ella Loren, who asks, so why RT? Well, Ella, I have total editorial control, and RT offers an international platform, so why not RT? Then from Adam Roberts, what does slange mean? Well, Adam, it's Gaelic. It means good health, cheers, except it's not usually water in the glass. And then from the Godfather, if you were Prime Minister, would you stop Brexit? Yes, Godfather, I certainly would. An email from Neil from Miami. I think your show is a huge mistake and reveals a naivety previous only seen in your courting of Donald Trump. Neil, I thought I'd atoned for that. And as for the show, well, why don't you watch it and make up your own mind? And then from Last John, when are you getting President Trump on the show? Well, Last John, I thought a joint interview with Chairman Kim of North Korea, that would be a cracking episode. And lastly, from Miss Kate Smith, how would you like history to remember you? Well, Kate, alive. Alive. Now to our regular feature, State Your Case. Most often this will be a prominent public figure, but I'd also like to give you the opportunity to state your case. So if you feel strongly about an issue and like a chance to air your views, then please write to me. In the midst of the Westminster chaos and confusion, one woman has seized the moment to spell out a programme of radical reform. I once offered to make her a Minister of the Crown, but this determined lady said no. I'm of course referring to Baroness Helena Kennedy, QC. Welcome, Helena. Let's see you state your case.
Half of the population in this country is female, and so we should be proactively pursuing changes in the institutions which govern this country. That means we have to change Parliament, and we have to have equal numbers of men and women in there. All parties should be required to have all women shortlists as seats become available, and we should start this between now and the next election to kickstart this change. The aim should be to have at least half of Parliament female. There should also be proportional representation so that smaller parties like the Women's Equality Party can have its representation there. Half of the cabinet should be women, and the same should be so for select committees. Whips should lose their jobs if they're guilty of bullying, and there should be no revolving door for people leaving office, going straight into the private sector and making money out of their connections with the ministry they were in. We should also be pursuing votes for 16-year-olds. They know what equality looks like, and they would make sure it happened. And that's my case.
Let's clear up this business about how you turned me down.
I know I did.
Well, why?
I know, but I had been offered another job. And it was a job where I really felt I couldn't let people down. I'd agreed to take on a college at Oxford.
Not another just Oxbridge
College.
No,
but it was a special place because a very high percentage of the young people who go there are from state schools. In fact, we've got it up to 90% now. And so it was really about wanting to sort of work with this college on its special role that it plays in Oxford.
In that case, given that noble cause,
it was a noble cause.
But let's turn to your case.
Well, listen, we've just had this big problem about, women saying that the whole culture of Parliament is just so male, and that women in it just feel that they're marginalised, or they feel that they're harassed, or they're not taken seriously. And they really do feel that this is the place that can set the tone for the whole of the nation. And we're committed to the idea of equality, and we talk about it and talk it up a storm, but actually we don't deliver it. And you have to do that by changing the institutions at the centre of our universe. So we have to reform Parliament. And Parliament is the place where policy is made, it's where law is made, and if you want to change the lives of men and women and sort of renegotiate how that has been, then you have to start with Parliament.
But by doing something like having a gender balance in a select committee, is that actually going to change how men behave out with that select committee?
I think it does, because what happens is it changes the discourse, it changes the nature of the debate, because you've got as many women as men talking about the subject. And it's this business which I feel rather unhappy about, which is, we make a minister of women, and she's supposed to kind of deal with all the women's issues that cover the whole of the terrain, from defence through to foreign affairs, through to domestic policy, through a whole range of things. So you give it to one of the girls, rather than having women and women's issues and women's perspectives right at the heart of policy making and law making.
Votes at 16. I mean, obviously something I introduced when I was First Minister.
And you were
Scotland.
right, and I
when
applauded it.
When you go out speaking to kids at school, I mean, they must look at politics askance almost now. And do you think this involvement was going to assist the process of people seeing politics as an honourable profession?
I think that if young people don't get into the habit of doing it when they're young, and when they're still at school and they're learning about politics and they're learning about why voting matters, if you don't catch that soon after that, then basically people don't get round to doing it.
Finally, Helena, do you think your case has a chance of being realised?
Every one of these scandals in itself, everybody thinks, is this the tipping point? Is it all going to change now? And I'm afraid I'm now old enough to be able to say that it doesn't work that way. But every one of them is a step forward. And I think that it's all in the right direction, but this boulder needs pushing up the hill a bit faster. And so I'd like us to make the institutional changes.
I've been checking the House of Lords requirements and rules, and I find that although I'm not able to give you the whiskey to put in this, I can present you with one of her quakes.
Oh, how lovely. How lovely. I love that Scottish quake. That's wonderful. Thank you. That's great.
Helena Kenny, thank you so much for stating your case.
Lovely seeing you.
Last week, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, issued a landmark public apology and pardon to all men who have suffered injustice under laws criminalising gay sex. With Scotland now paving the way for reform on this major human rights issue, Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh looks at a nation's journey to a more equal society.
In recent years, Scotland has taken the lead in protecting rights for people who identify as LGBT. In 2014, it became the 17th country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage.
And the Marriage and Civil Partnership Scotland Bill is passed.
Both in 2015 and 16, Scotland was internationally recognised as the best country in Europe for LGBT equality and human rights. A private member's bill put forward by former SNP MP John Nicholson in the UK Parliament sought to pardon men convicted of historical same-sex sexual offences. Unfortunately, it was effectively talked out, filibustered. Emotions ran high and calls of shame were thrown at the minister.
That a pardon for the living takes place only after due process has taken place to the...
Last week, Scotland again took the lead and apologised for these injustices.
So today, as First Minister, I categorically, unequivocally and wholeheartedly apologise for those laws and for the hurt and the harm that they caused to so many.
I spoke to Member of Parliament Crispin Blunt.
It is an important statement about our attitude today to things that were perceived as crimes by society then, and that we now fully understand that they should never have been crimes in the first place.
There's a gay couple sitting in the gallery who were visibly relieved. There was clearly it had had such an impact on their lives. Do you think these visuals may hopefully have a positive impact on people's views on how to deal with equality around these areas?
Well, they should do. And of course, what every gay person has in common is the coming out experience, is then understanding who they are. And I didn't come out until I was 50, and indeed as a minister in the government. And I know how much that freedom and the ability to be true to myself means to me, and that's the same, I think, for every gay person, is the ability to be able to be at peace with yourself and able to be yourself is huge. And there is a lesson in the British experience where we've gone from full criminalisation enforced by the police with over 1,000 men in prison in the 1950s for consensual same-sex relationships to a position today where society is apologising, where we have same-sex marriage on the statute books, where we're taking the trouble to pardon everyone who was convicted of these offences in the past. And we need to be pointing out to our friends in Russia that they represent, in terms of Russian parliamentarians, just as many gay people as I do, in terms of the proportion of their population, and they have rights to be protected.
There was recently in Parliament a debate on global rights in relation to the LGBT communities.
Given what had happened, particularly in Egypt and in Chechnya and elsewhere, it was appropriate to have a debate to remind people of exactly what is going on in the rest of the world. And it's utterly outrageous to discriminate against someone on the basis of a characteristic they don't choose. It's the same as racism. If you discriminate against someone because of the colour of their skin, that's now accepted globally as completely unacceptable. Well, the same goes for sexuality.
There's been I remember 2014 when the Scots Parliament passed equal marriage legislation. What a proud moment that was. But listening to Crispin Blunt, he's saying there's more to be done, both domestically and internationally.
I mean, there's no doubt that the campaign for equality has to continue and has to continue at the rate and pace of change that people want. And I think what we've seen Crispin saying is that Parliament has an important role to play, obviously all parliaments across the United Kingdom, in ensuring that legislation keeps up to date with people's demands, rightful demands for change.
Thank you, Tasmina. Coming up after the break, something very special. An interview with Catalonia's Carles Puigdemont, an elected president currently in exile. It's personal, it's in-depth, and it's also democratic dynamite. Welcome back. Catalan President Carles Puigdemont is currently in exile in Belgium. Following his parliament's recent unilateral declaration of independence, he is accused of rebellion, sedition and embezzlement, criminal charges which could lead to him being imprisoned for up to 30 years. Today on this show, he turns the tables on his accusers and sets dramatic challenges for Spain, for Europe, and for the Secretary-General of the United Nations. Speaking confidently in English, his fourth language, this is what he has to say. President Puigdemont, in the space of a few weeks, you'll become one of the most famous politicians on the planet. But I want to start with explaining the man, the personality behind the public face. So, where did you grow up in Catalonia? When did you come to believe that Catalonia should be an independent country?
Well, I was born during the Franco's dictatorship, till 12 or 13 years old. So my first school was during this era, when, for example, my language, Catalan, was prohibited. After the Franco's death, there was a very huge movement, democratic movement. I feel that the world that starts at this moment, it's calling me. It's something about me and my future. I was engaged to build a new society.
You started your career as a journalist.
Yes.
Before you moved into politics. What provoked you to move from journalism to recounting events to actually making events?
Well, you're a journalist now. You come from politics to journalist.
I've gone in the other direction.
Well, I'm still a journalist. In fact, I'm a member of the College of Journalists of Catalonia. My point of view is also still one of a journalist point of view. It's not a politician only. I think that helped me to make politics in our era. Our era is the era of the communications.
It's now almost 2 years since you became president of Catalonia. I know when I was First Minister of Scotland, it was the most enormous honour and responsibility.
It was.
But over that period, how many times have you tried to get Sr. Rajoy, the government of Spain, to agree to an agreed democratic vote, a referendum, in the same way as I persuaded David Cameron in Scotland and Westminster back in 2012 to have an agreed formulation to discuss and decide an issue? How many times?
Well, obviously, Mr. Rajoy is not David Cameron, and Spain is not UK. Directly, I tried to offer to Mr. Rajoy directly twice, front of Mr. Rajoy during 2 meetings, and publicly a lot of times. I offer an agreement about the date of this referendum. The question, the majority that we need in order to proclaim independence or not, and also, an agreement for a generation, despite the results. Well, they said me, the last time that I proposed directly to Mr. Rajoy, they said, well, in reality, I can't, and I don't want. This is one of the most important problems in the Spanish state. You have the duty to put solutions on the table and to start discussions about how we can solve this problem.
But many people watching will be puzzled to hear your account, because the traditional view, the view of the Spanish government, the view internationally has been that the balance of opinion in Catalonia has been against independence. So if Sr. Rajoy was so confident of that, then why didn't he agree to the vote?
Well, because probably that is not true. Because they know perfectly there are a huge majority in Catalonia that doesn't accept the current situation. The mentality of the Spanish state, and particularly from Mr. Rajoy, looks unity of Spain like a religion. It's not a political matter. It's a spiritual or religion question about faith. So there is an intellectual incapacity to admit the real possibility that Spain could be different in the future.
Let's take you to that day, that extraordinary day on the 1st of October. And tell me what your emotions were that day. On the one hand, there was the celebration of millions of your fellow country people coming out to exercise a vote for self-determination. On the other hand, there was the violence that we all saw on our television screens from the state police. So what were the conflicting emotions that you felt as President of Catalonia on that famous day?
Well, there was a day of the victory of Catalonia against the repression, the persecution of the Spanish state. On the other hand, of course, there was a day of the extremely violence. I couldn't imagine the reaction like that from the democratic state in European Union. For me, it was unimaginable. It was not possible in my mind. We are prepared to confront some judicial decisions in order to discuss in the Constitutional Court about our decisions, but not the use of violence, because the people was very peaceful. All this process, from the beginning of the process, was extremely peaceful movement, and we show in face of all the world our commitment to peace, on democracy. And the answer come from Spanish state, for me, was a first signal that the things could be Spain could use the violence, the repression, in order to stop a democratic revolution. It was a tragic day to do, because I see directly the violence in my face. The school in my hometown, there are a lot of injuries, a lot of injuries.
It is deeply ingrained, your argument would be, in the pursuit of independence for Catalonia, that it must be a peaceful process at all costs.
We don't want to be founded by using the violence. It's the only possibility to be independent is through the democracy. If the majority of Catalan people want to be independent, of course, Catalonia will be independent. It's not only my commitment, personal commitment, but the Catalan society, the Catalan people are deeply committed to use only the way of democracy, to not jump in the provocation of the Spanish state in order to transform the Catalan streets in like a war field. We must resist this provocation.
And then an overwhelming victory for independence, but the brave new republic really only lasted a weekend. How did you feel that day when you declared a Catalan republic?
Well, of course, it was not for us. It was a very serious moment, a very important moment, and very historical moment. For it was not a party. It was a moment for our generation, for our lives, for our biographies, for our also our commitment as politicians. It was a day of honor, because in this day we make possible all that we said before.
By the start of the next week, the Spanish judicial system rolled into action and took away the constitutional prize that Catalonia had gained.
Well, this mistake, in fact, starts a new era. In the end of this era, that will start a Catalan Republic. Because in these conditions, it's not possible. There is no future for Catalonia to remain in Spain in these conditions.
But Mr. President, you're now in a position where you are in exile with many of your ministers here in Brussels. Many of your other ministers are in jail in Spain. How can you be so confident about the outcome given that situation?
Well, have you seen the streets of Barcelona last week? Full of people demanding freedom. There is no one demands freedom for criminals. We are not criminals. We are politicians, are legal and legitimate representatives of Catalan people.
And are you confident that the forces of independence can prevail at the Catalan elections in December?
That is true. I'm confident in this victory. But I want to ask the Spanish state, and also the European authorities, if they will accept a result like this. If the independence movements or forces are the majority in the next Catalan parliament, is the Spanish state ready to accept?
So this is a direct challenge to Senior Rajoy. You're challenging him, given that he's called this election. Will he accept the result?
Exactly. Not only for the Mariano Rajoy, also for the European authorities. Because if the majority of Catalan people want to be independent, well, this is a real answer. This is a reality. And we must make politics with the reality, not with a fantasy. Of course, I think the Spanish government and the European authorities would like a Catalonia without people who want independence, but it's real. And if in the next elections we will win, that I propose to the Mr. Rajoy, Mr. Juncker, Mr. Tajani, to accept and to start a new era of dialogue and negotiation about this reality.
Many people have commented on the position in Catalonia, including the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, who has said that he wants to see a negotiated settlement. Were you encouraged to hear that statement from the Secretary General? And do you think that is a possible route to advance the Catalan cause?
Yes, of course. There is no possibility to achieve this process without negotiation. And I propose to talk about this also in the United Nations. There is an opportunity to make something helpful for all of us from the United Nations, from Secretary General of the United Nations, is to provoke, to invite us to start talks and negotiations.
Mr. President, you've challenged Senior Rajoy to accept the result of the December elections. You've challenged the European Union to respect democracy in Catalonia. You've said that the United Nations could see advantages in the success of a peaceful movement. But you're a president of a country. What is your message to the people of Catalonia?
We must be confident, resilient, because we will win. We will succeed. Finally, democracy will prevail.
Mr. President, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Strong stuff from Carles Puigdemont. Let me be clear about 2 points. One, if Senior Rajoy of Spain would like a right of reply, then this chair is absolutely available to him for next week's show. And two, and this may be a surprise to many watching, I have never called for Catalan independence. Not because I'm not sympathetic, obviously I am, but Scotland is not Catalonia, and Catalonia is not Scotland. It is for the people of Catalonia to decide their own future, or at least it should be. What I've called for is the right of the people to decide freely and fairly. They should be able to vote for or against independence without state police batons raining down their heads, without old age pensioners being beaten up, without women being dragged downstairs, without rubber bullets, without thugs in police uniforms seizing ballot boxes, without the courts being used for political purposes, and without democratic politicians being locked up for being, well, democratic politicians. The response of the powers that are in Europe has been pathetic. State convenience takes priority over democracy. What a dangerous precedent that creates. And equally, what a lesson there would be if a movement for peaceful, democratic progress could be successful. If the people can deliver change through votes and ballots, not bombs and bullets. Democracy will prevail, says Catalonia's president. Let's hope he's right. From Tasmina and I, until the next time, goodbye for now.